Welcome to the Seed Family Podcast, where we explore natural homeschooling, gentle parenting,
simple living, and family adventure.
I'm Rachel Rainbolt, the Sage Parenting Coach, coming to you from the Pacific Northwest, where I live wild and free in connection with my 3 wildlings and the Papa Bear in our fixer-upper on the beach. This is episode 72, and today I'm here with Robyn Robertson talking about unschooling teens. Robyn is an unschooling mom to 2 teenagers, host of the Honey, I'm Homeschooling the Kids podcast. She's a business owner, a political advocate for home education and self-directed learning, and a public school board trustee. So join us around the campfire and let's get living the family life of our dreams. Robyn joined me for episode 5 on adventure, and I've been on her podcast, Honey, I'm Homeschooling the Kids, a couple of times. She is a friend, and something we have been bonding over recently is that we are both in this season of parenting teens. We are in it. I did share. Yes, I did share a conversation with Blake Bowles in episode 48 on teens, where we talked about like adolescence as a developmental stage. But today I want to share a conversation with my unschooling mama friend from the inside. So what it's like as a parent to be in this season. So thank you, Robyn, for being in it with me here.
Oh, thank you. It's nice to have someone else in it with us, right?
Yes, exactly.
Always nice.
Will you remind everyone who you are and what you're passionate about?
Absolutely. So I'm Robyn Robertson, and I am an unschooling mom to 2 kids. My kids are 15 and 12, and we've been on this journey as a family with my husband for 9 years and counting. We began as world schoolers. We wanted to take our kids traveling. So that's kind of how this life adventure began. And really, travel is something that I have always connected with. I'm a kid who has parents from 2 different cultures and countries. My dad worked overseas and in different countries through the years. So we moved and we traveled. And I felt like that was actually a gift that I was given on so many levels. And it was something that we wanted to do with our kids or offer our kids as well. So that kind of was the start of our journey. But on the other side of it, I still am a learner, a life learner in every way, especially with this natural learning journey. I support other families that are on the natural learning journey through coaching and mentoring, through my podcast, Honey, I'm Homeschooling the Kids, and other resources and ways through that community that we support others that are just looking for clarity and support and helping to define, those values and purpose that help us kind of be aligned with what is really important to us. And then on the other side, I'm kind of like an education geek in some ways. I'm also a public school board trustee. So I'm a locally elected representative for my community in that area as well.
Oh, cool. Okay, so how does this season of parenting teenagers feel different from earlier seasons of parenthood?
Well, childhood is different in all of the stages, and this is a completely different stage. I think, for those of us with kids, where we grow with them from infancy to toddler to young children, there is a different, I think, outlook and excitement of life, or a way of looking at life that begins to, I think, shift and change as our kids grow. And it's been a different season because I think in that way, not shifting and changing in a bad way, but because our kids become more independent. Their needs change as well. Their wants start to shift, and the clarity and focus that they have for life begins to sharpen or it begins to shift as well. And so our journey as parents, or for this season as parents in these teen years, has had to shift with that, with their growth and with where they're going. And then it's different, because they are more independent. It's different from when they were young and they really needed their parents for a lot of life-giving things, literal life-giving things, right? So I think that, that's a big thing is, they're seeking more independence, autonomy, and sometimes there's some uncertainty for them in that. And I've found that the shift has been, I'm needed less in the old areas, but more in other areas. And that's been a very big change. And I think as that change as well, still an emotional support, but it's shifted in that way. So I think that's been the season. And so knowing how to parent without being overbearing, but supportive, encouraging and validating as well. And then you see more of yourself. I think as a teen, with your kids as teens, you see more of yourself as a teen and adult. So that in itself for the parent, that process has been really interesting.
Those are such good points. I like that last bit too about like each step that our like sort of season that our kid moves through, we tend to like be invited to work through our own issues from that season of our childhood, because we kind of see a bit of ourselves reflected back in the different seasons. And a lot of us have a particularly like extra amount of baggage around those teen years, right? So that makes perfect sense. You said that in this season, you need like a less of certain things and like more of other things. What are you needing like less of and more of?
Well, I think the less is, their basic needs, they're pretty good at taking care of those things for themselves and communicating to me about what they need as well, recognizing and being able to vocalize that as well. When they were younger, it was a bit different. So there's less, I think a part of it is stepping back as well. They need some more space.
Yeah.
And so I think it's also stepping back, so giving them more space and not taking up as much space in their life, but at the same time being a supportive, constant presence, if that makes sense, like learning that balance.
Taking up less space. I love that. And isn't that so true about like the trajectory of the whole journey from like pregnancy all the way through launching, that there's just this gradual like leaning back more and more and more and leaving more and more and more space for them to grow into.
Yeah, absolutely. There is. And and then at the same time as well, it's, because I think they're also growing in other areas that are new to them. So it's also being there to communicate, or also just being an ear, saying, saying, I'm here if you want to share anything, I'm here.
Yeah. It's funny because most like mainstream parents and kids who are being raised like kind of under that mainstream parenting paradigm struggle the most with toddlers and teens, because those are the seasons when like control-based parenting fails the most. Like those are the two seasons where they're really bursting in their independence. And so like kind of like how you were talking about, like that positioning yourself as like an ally or a mentor, it particularly in those two seasons is paramount.
Yeah, it is. And actually, I like how you explained that as well. And because it rings so true in the way that you said they're bursting in their independence in the toddler years and the teen years. And I think as well, that is the change and shift, because if we are not practicing parenting skills that are, more authoritarian or top down, when others maybe are around us, or society is encouraging that, parents, you have to be the overbearing word and influence, that your kids can't handle that independence. if you're, if you're parenting and using the practice of supporting independence and autonomy and supporting that growth and emotional growth as well, it's a different side of things, because I think so much of it is trying to tamp down the independence and not letting it flourish, and so finding ways to support it so that they can exercise. I think that's the thing as well. To have independence and autonomy, you still need practice with it.
Mhm.
And if you don't have a chance to practice it, it's hard to grow within it. And I think
Yes.
that's the practice for me as a parent as well, is giving space to practice that independence, which also means giving space to make those mistakes that you need to make when you're practicing
Yes.
your independence. And then when you're making those mistakes, allowing them just to be mistakes, not saying, oh, this is written in stone now. This is your life
Yeah.
trajectory. This defines you. Just that, being, and this is the balance as well, as when those practices, those mistakes, those choices sometimes remind you of your own, when you're like, no. You want to say no, but it's also, again, that practice of, I'm here, those things happen, and you can get through it, and we can get through it, and we can help you with whatever you need. It doesn't define you though.
Yes, goodness, yes. Yeah, all those like lessons that I try to like massage into parents in those earlier years, like they really are exemplified and really pay off too, like in the teen years. All that work of feeling this deep, meaningful connection, but also recognizing that these are separate beings, that they are not yours to control. You do not get to like mold and form and create a human. Like they are their own separate human, and you are in this like deep bond with them, but they are separate, and honoring whatever freedoms they reach for, and using language. I use the same language with my teens and my friends and my toddlers, where like if they're trying to do something, reaching for some sort of freedom, and I see some sort of problem with it, I'll use things like I'm noticing, or I'm wondering, or here's my concern is a really, really big one, right? That I'll use like, oh, like for example, if my toddler wants to run into the street, right? You'd be like, okay, I see that you really want to move your body, and it looks like there's some fun things on the other side of the street. Here's my concern, and like talk through it. And then what ideas do you have? And then let's try them. And it's how can I help is a big one. And all that same language, like that, we started using when they were little, now like pays off in a huge way when they're teens, because again, it like positioned us as like allies and mentors, and my teens feel like they can come to me with questions or problems, and when they're trying to make plans, they're foreseeing concerns. They're using that same like mindset and those same thought processes that we've been supporting them and making all along. Because like you said, we like let them make their mistakes. Like we just kind of helped them talk through things and let them experience life and learn from them. And then because we weren't trying to control them or shame them, like they would come to us with their mistakes and talk through them and talk about what we learned and how to bring it into the next experience they have. So really, it feels like this adolescent time, it's like all those seeds that we planted and worked so hard planting in all those earlier years, like we really get to see how those have taken root in our blossoming.
Yeah, absolutely. It's, and I think of, because I'm very, you'll say words and I can picture it visually, and I totally picture that garden, right?
Yeah.
And I know that there's so many references to parenting and being like the gardener and the carpenter. That book is, I think, is it Alison Gopnik? Which
Yep.
The gardener and the carpenter, and
Yeah.
and how the seeds that we plant as well, like this is our continuous perennial garden. And those flowers and blossoms and plants that just keep growing and keep coming up. But some of those, there are some ones that we plant at a certain time and they don't seem to come up with the season we're expecting to, but maybe they come up later on. And, instead of, sometimes we look at, maybe we forget that we planted it, or we know it's there and we start to see it. And yeah, we absolutely want to encourage it. We also don't want to tamp it down either, right? And
Mhm.
sometimes it really, really flourishes and grows certain aspects of that too. And it's, it's still allowing that to flourish and encourage them. And yeah, absolutely. It's, I love that I'm noticing here's my concern. How can I help?
Yeah.
It's again, that supportive role of supporting it to flourish and still to grow instead of trying to pull things out and make it stop kind of thing if it's
Yes.
flourishing a lot.
Yes. And all along this parenting journey, like not being attached to the outcome, like is something that I feel like
It's not easy.
it's not, right? It's so not. Like even like when I'll share stories of my kids, I'll often include a little disclaimer of that, like, and I don't hold my kids up as like proof of concept. Like I don't show up in this way to try to manipulate a certain outcome in them. Like I just show up in this way because it creates the most like peaceful, nurturing, meaningful relationship and life that we live together. Like it feels good to show up this way, and it works really well to like live in harmony with the people that you care about. And they get to be whoever they want to be, right? Like there's like that piece of like that inherent way of being that you're kind of born with, and then the choices that they get to make about who they want to be and how they want to live and how they want to show up in the world. So like I will often have to remind myself like about like not getting attached to the outcome, particularly in the adolescent season, because there's so much experimenting going on. They try all these different identities and experiences on for size, and that is completely normal. And to like really to hold the space for that and to not get too attached, for better or for worse, of of what different iterations they're trying on at any given moment.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that is important because we do. I mean, it's still a practice for me not to be attached to the outcome, right?
Yeah.
And to remember, and I know you've talked about this often as well, that, our children they're not us. They're
Mhm.
separate, unique individuals who are born with their own life, their own personality, their own soul, their own beingness. And we have a tendency of sometimes wanting to try and mold them into little mini me's as much as possible, but that they're not. And as part of solidifying their beingness and their owning their own life and journey, absolutely, they're going to try on different things. They're going to test different things. And you need to with life. I think even as adults, we still continue to do that.
Yes.
It's a natural process that we have to, I think, in so many ways, right? In order to grow and learn and to shift and change.
It's a continuous evolution for sure. I think to me, it feels like I had this season of nurturing babies and then parenting children and now launching adolescents. And my teens aren't literally launching like tomorrow, but I really do see how the teenage years are when their world expands beyond your family, like their attachment expands beyond you. And that gradual work of individuating is the work. Like in different seasons, you can kind of say like, oh, this is the work of this season, like this developmental work. And launching, I feel like it really kind of starts at like 13 and then continues on all the way through adolescence. It's this like that really is kind of the developmental focus. It's like their attachment used to just be the two of you, and then it was like your little family, and then maybe this like smaller, close, tight-knit community that you kind of designed. And then in the adolescence is really where like that attachment bubble like really expands out into the world.
It really does. It really, really does. And I think, they start to test their feet and they want to move into a broader circle and move more into the world. My son is the oldest, he's 15, and we've really seen that with him for sure the last few years of stepping beyond our circle, beyond our community, and kind of, testing and finding his own way outside of that. And I see, in so many ways, I see as he's returned from stepping out as well, how it's like, oh yeah, he needed that in order to, I guess, like for better word, find himself more, to really like become more of himself. Because I think as much as we still support independence and autonomy and who they are, there's still that kind of especially when we're homeschooling and home educating all together in this tight knit bond, there's still overlap in many ways, I think. And so, yeah, he was definitely searching for an extension or something outside of our tight knit circle.
Yeah.
And, it was one of those things as well where, we still, lots of conversations, time, and we wanted to, open conversations, questions, helping him research and find things, and then kind of vetting as well too, right? Because when you're outside of the home and you want to make sure, here's my concern, talking in the same, we had the same, here's, I'm noticing that, there was a few things that we wanted to be in conversation with him about, and it was good. So that, and also where he could be aware and be open to things that maybe he wouldn't have experienced at home. So, but it was needed. And I think that was the thing as well, is with the return, the changes, they had to happen outside of this circle. Yeah.
Yeah. And it can be easy to like take that personally.
Oh my goodness. Yes. Totally.
Like your son, comes to you and says, like, I want to go live in the mountains with these strangers for 6 months. Like it would be really easy to take that personally, like that could feel like a rejection. So like for me, again, I'm always having to kind of like mother myself in that sense around that, like, this is not a rejection of me. Like this is an expansion of their attachment to the bigger, broader world. And it's really because like that connection has been so good and we've given them like this incredible life and supported them so well that now they feel so confident and able to go out and handle, kind of the bumps and bruises that they're going to get beyond us. Like they feel okay to do that because we did our job well, right? It's this like when they're toddlers, if we've nurtured that attachment so well, then they want to run away because they feel so secure that if they fall down, you'll come in and help them. So that means they run farther.
Yeah. It's all good. Yeah.
It's the same thing with teenagers, right? Like they go farther. Like my kids like travel to other states on their own with people I don't know. Like, so like just trying to like, it's easy to take that personally. So to try to reframe it that like our connection is so strong and like I feel like I've done my job so well in supporting them as best I can that they feel that they can scratch all of these developmental itches, right? That they can expand, like kind of blow out that circle of attachment to include all sorts of people and experiences that are going to leave them, with some bruises and some bumps, but like that's got to happen, right? You've got to like experience life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, for me personally, I think, reframing is so important. And, that was something we tried to do. My husband and I tried to do as much as possible as well. My husband's really good at that. I think maybe on we support each other in different, maybe sometimes I help him reframe and he helps me reframe. But a lot of it as well too, it wasn't until after the fact as well that it was the reassurance too, right? The reminder that, it's, that is what happened. And even, our kids saying, well, this is why we live the life that we live.
Yes.
So that we can isn't that those are values so that we can, as we talk about, so that we can support our interests, we can experience new things, we can go on adventures, we can still be connected, but we can grow outside of this as well. And, it's good. I like it when my kids remind me as well, because it's like, yes, that's right.
I love that.
That's the purpose. Right.
Yes. To live, like to make choices, like to step forward in values aligned directions and like having the freedom and the support to do that. I love that. Like your kids can remind you of that. And I think it's normal too, like as we transition into different seasons of parenthood, that kind of the family needs change, and often there are like bigger lifestyle adjustments that go along with that. Like a physical manifestation of this transition in our family is that we're selling our house, like which I know I talked about in the real estate episode with Erica Brown, but like this homestead and the world that we go out and explore together has served us so well. And now in this new season, our needs have changed. Like my teens need a community beyond our property that they can engage in totally independently. Like before it was like me like arranging things and signing us up for these structured programs, and I'm driving them everywhere, and it was wonderful and lovely and great. And now like they want to be able to move out into the community completely on their own, like not having me be the middleman, which makes total sense. And they want to like root themselves into these different community structures. Again, that's not like between, like where I'm not standing between them and all of those things, for better or for worse, right? Like if they asked to do something, I would always say like, sure, let's do it. It's not like I was stopping them, but it's just different. They just want to like engage with it totally independently. So like sometimes that struggle can be like adjusting to the shift in the relationship directly between you and your child, but also adjusting to the different lifestyle things that change. Like sometimes for parents, like friendships are easier in like the play date setting, right? Like it's easier for us to nurture that friendship like connection that we need when we kind of do it through our children. And then as they get older and they go off and they manage these relationships on their own, then we then have to like make changes in our lives in order to meet those needs differently now.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And especially as they shift and grow, and, I think with play dates before, when they're younger, they kind of happily, they come along and they're connecting and having fun. And then, their interests blossom. Their personalities are connected to others, and maybe sometimes less with others over time as well. And so it's more about what they need too than also what we need, for sure. I see that with us too, because, we live on a farm and we're fairly remote. So it's not like, if my kids want to go into town until my son gets his license, which will be in a few months, but, they still rely on us or someone to drive them into town, for example.
Yeah.
And there's definitely been, my daughter would say, oh, it'd be nice to live in town. And then I could just, because if they say they go to their they walk on their own somewhere, or, it's just, they have that accessibility independently. And I definitely noticed that for sure as well.
Yeah.
And then also interest too, where we live, because it is remote enough. The other thing I've found now that I'm noticing more and more is, as my kids have developed specific interests over time, and because they have the time to focus on them, they become really good at certain things. And not necessarily everyone is going to have the same interests, or if they do, they might not have had the same time to devote to those interests. So we're also seeing a point where it's almost like my kids need some people who are as intensely focused in some of those areas as they are,
Yes.
who can kind of keep up with them, but also challenge them still too.
Yes.
And that's one thing that we notice that we're having that conversation about too. It's like, okay, so how are we going to support this moving forward? Is it going to be a location change? What are we going to do to support it? There's some ways right now we've found, but still with that other peer group of challenging and being in that kind of focused area and growing in that, they need more. So.
Yes. Like the amount of energy and time that they need to dedicate to those peer interactions around like shared interests is immense compared to previous seasons, for sure. So like, what does supporting interests and passions look like in the teen years? Like, how do you support that in your kids?
Honestly, I think now in the teen years, it's more chances to have hands-on practice, experience, and engagement, way more than before. So, for us, it's just really having them, supporting and helping them have just those opportunities to do those things, like actually do things. So, one of the ways I think for us, for a specific example, is so my son going and working for a wildlife outfitters. So that was something that we helped him connect with. And it was actually an old family friend who runs this outfitters who we had reached, and he knew we homeschooled. So he had said, yeah, I'll take, whenever Ronan's ready, he can come, definitely I'll take him on, because he knew our family and has like old connections with that. And so once Ronan, he just had to, there was a few things, like he had to be physically bigger, because the work is really, it's labor, it's long days, it's hard, intense work. So he needed some time to grow into it before he would go off, and to feel safe and, secure that he was off in the wilderness with no contact whatsoever with grizzly bears and everything else for 6 months. So, but it's, sometimes finding those opportunities that might be just harder to connect with. If, I don't know if he on his own would have been able to do that and find that. So helping him to make those connections. And then, we helped him do that. And then we gave it, then he took over from then, kind of thing. Right. So he can keep doing that. In other ways, like my kids are really, for example, into, because wintertime is almost necessary for us. We have such long winters to be active outside. So over the years, we've got into like snowboarding and skiing quite a bit. So we've just recently, this year particularly, just been more accessible to the mountains. And actually, we have a cabin closer to the mountains now, so we can spend more time there. So our kids can ski and snowboard and be out and do those things. We are close to a ski hill, a small community ski hill, which is very close. And that's great, but the same, they need, sometimes they need more challenge for that. So things like that right now have been ways that we've helped them to just be and do within their days, and be out in the real world, is supporting that and helping them to make that connection. The thing that I find is also, and this, I know we'll probably talk about this a little bit, is it's usually, sometimes it's also, part of it is helping them now as well to be able to speak for themselves in those conversations when they're confronted with people outside of our community or who know who we are, who don't get that teens and adolescents can live this life. Do you know what I mean? Who are like, shouldn't you be in a desk at school? Shouldn't you be doing this or this? Or, like it's kind of, and so the first response is pushback against them, and doubt. So it's also helping them to vocalize a little bit more, like for themselves, that, this is what I'm doing. And it's actually completely normal. It's just shifted in the last little while that people don't think it's normal. So yeah, that's the other thing that's been a new thing that they've been confronting.
Yeah, I think like teenagers really need that like adventure, that freedom, that risk taking, right? Like a lot of the things that you described included a lot of that. And they tend to like dive deeper into whatever interests they're in and want to connect with other peers around those interests. So for us, like for Bay, that's been sailing. He is like deep in sailing, and it takes up an immense, like he wants to dedicate an immense amount of time and energy and resources to it. And his friends are all in that community. And his older sister is in it with him now, and his little brother is in it with him now. And so again, it's them kind of like rooting into these other communities beyond just our little family, or even beyond like the homeschooling community, and really leaning into any like adventures that connect, that come up, opportunities for adventures that come up through that. So like they were invited to participate in the Rose Bowl regatta in California. So we took a trip to California, and while we were there, we went to the theme parks, and they invited their friends, and like just that like adventure and that freedom. So like adventure, and freedom and risk taking has always been some of like an ingredient, like some strands that are woven throughout the fabric of our lives and our parenting and all of that. But now that they're teenagers, it's like elevated, and it's elevated in a way that's actually way more fun for us too. Like I really loved like those earlier seasons, and it's super fun to be at Disneyland and just run around to all of the big roller coasters.
Right.
Like that's super fun too. So like really kind of embracing all of the fun of this like adventure and freedom and risk taking has been enjoyable to us. And then I think like for us, school has been a part of that conversation in a way that it never was before. Like now that my oldest is in college, like she's 16 and she goes to college and she loves like being there in person, like because of COVID, like if a lot of the classes are online. She was super excited to like be in this marine biology class that meets in this like lab on this dock. And like when the COVID numbers come up, they have to like go back to remote. And she's always super bummed because she wants to like be out there in the world with other mature people, like doing interesting things. And like for my 13-year-old, he plans to try high school in the fall, which is like sort of will be a big transition for us for sure, because like his sailing team, it's technically like a high school team that's like connected to the high school, and all the homeschooling programs are actually still shut down. So like all of the places where we used to be able to spend significant amounts of times with other kids his age, like the public school is the only thing that's still allowed to meet like with large groups of teens. So like that makes perfect sense to me. Like, yeah, I really do think it's a good idea. This could help you meet like this need that I don't really see any other way of meeting. So he's going to try that in the fall, which will be a big change for us. So just that like reaching out into the community in like an adventurous, risk-taking way. And I want to say too, for like unschooling families whose kids try school, like when they're really young and you're kind of inviting them to leave school, there's often resistance because like it's sort of like the devil, like they don't know what the alternative would be, and that's what's familiar. So there might be some resistance. And then sometimes when kids are younger and they say they want to try school, it's because what I invite parents to do is to first work with them to try to identify what need they think school will meet for them, and then try and meet that like in ways that are more aligned with the lifestyle and the values that you have and all of that. So for example, a lot of kids when they're younger will think school is like High School Musical, right? It's just like kids like singing and dancing through the halls all day.
Yep.
Like, really, that's not what it's like. But I mean, of course, if after you're like really layering in all these other ways of meeting those needs, kids still want to try school, like, sure, fine. Now that they're older though, like it feels really different, but also I feel good about it because my kid is entering that system in a totally different way than a lot of the other kids in that system, in the sense that he's there by choice. He knows he can leave at any time. He knows that his value is not based on like a test score or a grade in a court, all these like choosing this is not a rejection of the values and the lifestyle that we've been working toward all this time. Like he gets to take all those things with him into that system now, which feels good.
Yeah, I think it's a huge shift. And I think that he's going in with choice. He's choosing to be there definitely shifts the feeling and the attitude for sure. I agree. And I think that's the difference for most kids is that there isn't a choice, or they don't know that that there is actually a choice as well. And I see that with my daughter too, because she's just a year young. She's 12. And, years ago, she had come to us and said, I think I want to try school. And, and again, it was one of those conversations where at first I think, am I doing this all wrong? She wants to go back to school, that's my first in my mind. I'm processing this. Right. And at the same time, I'm just trying to nod and, okay, tell me more, I'm thinking, what am I doing? Like, what do I got to change? All this. And then as I process it more and reflect and reframe. And, again, I remember my husband being great because he's like, this is why we're doing this. So our kids can have these conversations and can bring to us and know that they have choice. And so the conversation became, okay, so what do you, we'll support you. Absolutely. What do you need right now that we can give you, or what do you see school? What do you want from school as well? And also to know that it's not a be all end all, that if you want to try it and it's not your jam, that there's still other choices that you have as well. And, she told us, well, she was actually at the time, I think she was probably about 10. So she had said, well, I don't want to go right now. I'd like to try grade 7 age. But it turned out the big thing that she wanted to do was play team sports. the school. And we ended up finding her. She ended up after that joining club teams like volleyball. She's really into volleyball. So she joined club, and that kind of, that
Met the need.
Met the needs. That's what she needed. Exactly.
Yeah.
And I mean, COVID again has shifted things. So club had to shut down for quite a while. But then this year she was actually, as a homeschooler, able to play on the school volleyball team. So that was really good. And so we asked her, because this year was grade 7 for her. It would have been the year she would have gone back to school, like she wanted to try. But she had said, no, I don't want to go back this year. I just want to play volleyball. So we were like, okay, that's no problem. All right. So, we'll look at it every year, what she wants to do, but also it is the same. It's looking for that peer connection as well. And I find with COVID, the shift has been because we haven't been able to meet and gather like we used to. She especially has been wanting, more of that connection. And she has through her sport, she's a lot of friends that go to school. So and that's the same as here. School has been open when everything else has been closed.
Yes.
So all the kids are gathering at school, and so that's been it's been a shift for sure. So
yes. Oh, yes, I relate to all of that. And there's definitely some frustration on my end in terms of
us
so
too.
Okay, so the only place where you can be with other teenagers is in school, but why is that true? Why can we not get together as homeschoolers? But because it's that's a whole that's a whole other side issue.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So you and I have been bonding over this shared experience, and I love how you describe it as a grief and growth stage for the parent. Can you talk about what that grief and growth has been like for you?
Oh yeah. Well, the grief has been, in so many ways, you're saying goodbye to a stage that, to your young children. And really that's what it is. And as a parent, I mean, I feel just like I just got all tingly now saying that out loud, right? So you're saying goodbye to this pretty big stage that's been part of your life so far. And because something new is being ushered in. So, and then that means a shift for not only your kids, but for you yourself as a person. So there's definitely been grieving and a grief process happening.
Yes. You have to fall in love with this new version of your kids and the new version of yourself.
Yes.
As you
Absolutely.
are now in this new season.
Yeah. And I think that's exactly it. They're falling in love with the new version of your kids and with yourself. And then again, seeing how many times I've looked at my kids, or they've said something, or, done something, had an expression, or come back from something, or telling me a story about somebody, a friend, or something that's happening. And I think, I think of myself again at that time as well. Right. So it's, again, there's that process of, in a way, it's kind of like sometimes you're grieving your own childhood, your own teenage self, right? And the things that there's a happiness in the part of seeing your kids being able to do some of those things and learn and grow through some of those things where maybe I was stuck as a teen, and for many years after that. So that part has been really nice in that way. But also sometimes there's the reminders of, things come up and you're like, oh, I almost forgot that I remember feeling that, feeling those feelings and being really uncertain because I didn't know how to process them, and those around me didn't know how to help me process them. So, there's also those memories that come up too that are part of this process as a parent. So yeah, it's been an interesting process.
The healing, the invitations for healing at each stage, for sure. I describe it. Sometimes for me, it feels like my inner child is jealous.
Yes.
That when I stand there, witnessing this freedom and this joy and this connection and this independence and these experiences that my kids will get. And my inner child feels jealous, and it brings up it's almost like when we were kids and we were moving through our experience, we didn't know any different. We didn't know that it could be any different or any better. So even if our needs were unmet, when you don't have a lived experience of something else to compare it to, it doesn't have as much meaning as then when you're on the other side and you're a parent and you're giving your kids this incredible life that like really honors their way of being and truly meets their needs, then your inner child is like, holy shit, like it could have been like this.
Yeah. Yeah.
It could have had like what? Like that's why I had all those feelings and all those, that's why so many things were hard. That's why I had these struggles. Like I had these needs they didn't even know I have. Like I learned that I had those needs by watching my kids have those needs get met. So it kind of creates this new space for healing, which is really, really wonderful. And it can be hard and uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. And I never thought of, but that is exactly, it's the whole healing process that we're going through. For sure. Yeah.
We're recording this in winter, and every year I participate in like a winter spiral ritual with these dear friends in celebration of winter solstice. And we think of something that we would like to release from the last year, like as we walk into the spiral and light our candle, and then something we would like to invite into the new year as we walk out, and we write it down and we burn it with our flame to like release it into the universe. And the thing I chose to release and invite was my attachment to the previous season's version of myself and my life. Like that is really like kind of in a nutshell, my like grief and growth in this transition is that I am so fully present and in love and in joy with each like season of parenthood. And so this one is such a big change. Like it's the most different, like as at any of the other seasons, when I transitioned, it didn't feel as different. And this one feels the most different. Yeah. And so really it feels like my work, and the thing that kind of I keep coming back to is to like release my attachment to the previous season's version of myself and my life. Because I do believe, and I am totally confident that like I feel how much I'm falling in love with this newer version of myself and my life, right? Like it's equally as wonderful and it's different, but to get to the other side, like to fully be in love with this new version of my kids and myself and my life, I do have to release that attachment to the other version. Like, and there's definitely grief and growth in that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. In order to move on, you have to let go or say goodbye in so many ways. Yeah. 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 That's really powerful. That's really, really powerful. And I love the burning of it, the actual physical, not only saying it and writing it, but then you're really letting it go. You're really burning it. So it's gone. You're really releasing it.
Rituals can be helpful. Like we don't have many rituals in modern life. So anytime I often lean on like my incredible witchy friends.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we actually are at a loss, I think, in so many ways, depending where you live, of our rituals and like not even traditions in some ways, but rituals, there's a difference, I think. And they really do bring meaning and into so many parts of our life that I think sometimes we just kind of let slip by, or we lose presence with it for sure, with our life and where we are for sure by missing out on those rituals. I know it's, I think Joseph Campbell talks a lot about that in like the hero's journey and different parts of the writing about how we are missing a lot of our rituals that were brought in different parts of our life. And I think, it's interesting because one ritual, a lot of places that have rituals are rituals into adolescence as well. And so it's interesting too, because I think some people say, well, high school is a ritual into adolescence, and those rituals are in place there. But if you're not attending school and those parts, those passages of school, which I mean, there's a whole other conversation with that there as well too. But sometimes it is important for our kids to, even within our family, to establish our own rituals for that. And I think, without realizing it, that's what we found with our oldest, was that him going away was his ritual into adulthood that he really needed. It was like that actual practicing that ritual, like it had to be an actual lived experience. And so it was really, really important for him to do that. And, I don't think beforehand, I think my husband recognized it before I did. But he relates a lot. He talks about that as well. How we're missing a lot of rituals and the importance that rituals can bring to our society and to our families and our communities too. So yeah, I'm just, I'm just thinking about all those things as we're talking and as it blossoms in my brain right now too. So, but yeah, the rituals are a big, yeah. I mean, now I think that's something I'm going to probably reflect on here for the rest of the afternoon too.
Yes. There's this great quote. I think it's from Clarissa Pinkola Estes in the Woman Who Run with Wolves book. And I totally don't know the quote, and I'm going to maim this metaphor, I'm sure. And she says it so much more beautifully. So I will try to look up that quote and put it in the show notes. But something to the effect of like, when we stake something to the earth, it not only can we then move forward without having to carry it, but then there's also like this validity, this recognition, this record with the universe that this happened and this was real. Yes. And ritual really like that is how I kind of get at that work. It's like walking the spiral, like lighting the candle, like writing this thing down on paper, like burning it to release it, those kinds of things. It's like, it helps me to not carry it forward with me forever.
Yeah.
But also like staking it to the earth, like this was real and this really happened. And it makes the work like tangible and physical in a way that really propels like healing and progress and growth.
Yeah. And it validates your experience.
Yes.
It validates what you've just gone through as well, instead of just someone being, okay, yeah, that, or you may be talking about it, but it really like staking it to the earth, it validates that you've gone through this and you're moving through it and you're growing into something else. So it makes a big, yeah, absolutely. It's important.
Okay. I want to circle back a little bit to something you started talking about earlier, where I'm hoping you can share some of the expectations and beliefs around teens in our society today, and then maybe how your experience has been different. Like, I know you talked about our kids moving out into the world kind of without us as the buffer, and a lot of people being resistant to that and having ideas and thoughts and feelings about that. And for the record, it's usually because their own inner child, again, is feeling jealous. Like, I'm uncomfortable with the level of freedom that you're enjoying right now because I was denied that at your age, right? Really, like, it can be helpful to reframe what they're saying in those
And some do
terms.
say that. Some do recognize that and are like, oh, yes, it's true. Yeah.
Yes. But what are some of those expectations and beliefs around teens in our society, and just how has your experience been different?
The idea that teens are incompetent, that they're not capable, that they can't do things that an adult could do, that they are immature. They need to be told everything to do because then they'll fill in the blank. I don't know, play video games all day, not do anything, not produce. There's a whole gamut and list that teens will just, they won't make the right choice. If they're given choices, I mean, that's also very, why is one choice the right choice? Or, but that's also a very, I think, opinion part, not necessarily a truth. And when you're talking about that, but there's a whole list of ideas around our teens that society has in place. And also, a lot of these, actually, it's interesting because I still, with my board work within the public schools, I hear a lot of these conversations about teens within the structure of school. And that's where I hear a lot of them repeated. A lot of that, teens are not motivated. You have to be on them if you want them to get anything done, that they don't care, a lot of those things as well. But also then the outcomes that we put on teens, that they have to learn a certain way and go a certain path, and that the only way that they're successful is if they enter and leave university within a certain time. That's another conversation I hear a lot. And if they're not following that path, then it's all doomed for them. Yes. And it's really interesting when we base and focus their success and validity of life, essentially, on a path of going into university when they're a certain age and then coming out because we're just sure that guarantees success. And the interesting thing is, we don't live with any of those ideas in our family. So it's really
Yeah, I think what it like
really interesting.
we infantilize, well, not we, you and me, you and I, but like we as in our culture and society, we infantilize adolescents and then stigmatize them for
Yes.
being infantilized.
Yeah.
Like
yeah. Yes.
It's like
and
we
then shame them for doing what we
Yes.
expect of them.
Yes, it's like we create the problem and then complain about them having this problem and put it all
Yes.
on them. Like, yeah, we infantilize them by saying, like, by controlling everything, by making all their decisions for them, by not giving them the freedoms they reach for, not let them make their own decisions, not let them make mistakes, by accounting for every minute of their time and using up every ounce of their energy, right? Like in all these different ways, like we infantilize them. And then in the same breath, complain that they don't know how to make good choices, that they're not motivated to do anything on their own, that they can't do anything for themselves. Like, how can people not see the irony, like the conflict in holding both of those things at the same time? It's like laughably ridiculous to me.
Yeah, I agree. It is. And I think of a conversation I actually had with a principal one time. And this principal was actually asking about our family and our kids because they were familiar with our life and how we learn our natural learning, especially as we have older kids. And this principal was, she wanted to repeat some of those ideas around teens, but then as we got more into the conversation, and she was actually great because she was asking questions, right? She was like curious.
As opposed to throwing accusations.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And she was curious because I think it was the first time she could have a conversation with someone who had experienced something different. And it was playing out in real life in that way. And she had said basically like, I could see it if, teenagers had more choice, they would then be more accountable, and she, it was kind of like, she was like, right. Yeah. Like, I guess if they weren't just expected to be told what to do every single day and their entire day organized in structures and bell rung for them, then they would most likely find their way through time and practice.
Yeah.
And it was, and the idea of, again, she wanted to ask me about college and university, especially if, someone homeschools and they don't get a high school diploma or different routes for that. And so I was talking to her about the different ways that if you still wanted to go to college or university, that you could still enter, that it wasn't just you get your diploma at 17 or 18 and then you enter right away. That here in Canada, it's a bit different than the US, but that you can enter as long as you have the course requirements, not necessarily the diploma. And then I explained how things are in the United States and how you have college where you can get your associate's degree. And she was fascinated. She didn't know any of it.
Wow.
And I find, and that's one thing I hope parents also realize too. Also, so you feel validated as a parent, that sometimes with school and educators, they maybe feel like they're coming down on you for your choices, but many times they just don't know that those choices are out there. Like they really, really don't. And I've learned that through the years, just from my many conversations with educators in my work, is that they just don't know. They have no idea. And sometimes we're the first people that they encounter that have done something differently and can share this experience with them. So yeah, it's interesting. And I hope there will be more community support. And I mean, I always envision a world where our children are able to be out in the community more and learn through that. Like, agile learning centers are kind of some ways where, they could have access. Our libraries, I think, are fantastic places, but if they can just be out living more, and they want it. The other thing
that's
is
what they want.
That's what they want. Exactly. And they want to be like, they want to feel like they want to give value is the other thing. People think that teens don't, that they just, they'll just play video games all day long if you let them. They enjoy being valuable, just like every single one of us. And having more opportunity and chances to do that, for any being, you feel good about yourself too. And then I find usually you want to give more, you want to reciprocate, you want to continue that circle as well. So.
Yes, teens want to meaningfully contribute. They want to create and live these fulfilling lives. And really, they only resort to these other things when they're just told no, and they just get the doors slammed in their face at every turn. Like if there's no other options, there are no better options. I love that non-judgmental curiosity that your colleague brought to that conversation. And that was like a really beautiful story. And it kind of, as you were talking, I was reminded of that Carol Black quote about like studying children in schools is like studying killer whales in SeaWorld. And really like the impression that the general public, that the world has about what adolescents are like, are really what they're like within the school system. And so like our, kind of unschooling community provides this really rich sample, like to see like what humans are like at this stage of development when we are really honoring all of their developmental needs at every step along the way, and the fullness of their personhood. And it's actually really cool. Like my kids are really cool people. And, the other families that we know, I would say the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like you when you get a chance to experience more things in your life, then those conversations that you have are that much richer as well.
Yeah.
And so why not why not experience more of those things and try things and be out in the real world and build that from a young age instead of waiting until you're 21 or 22 or how, whatever age they deem to be adults, I guess.
Yeah. Like, no, because like when kids first become teenagers is really when they start getting that itch to like start working on that launching. And we, in our society, will often say like, no, you can't start that till you're like 22 and have a college diploma. Then you can start like living and experimenting and contributing and, all of that stuff. And what we keep seeing is like, that doesn't work.
Yeah.
The brain won't just like wait, to work on all that stuff. So I love the point that you brought in about success too, about how for adolescents, success is defined so narrowly as like, get a high school diploma, get a college degree, ... But when we talk about success for the general population, we're much more open-minded to seeing and recognizing all the different versions of success, and how really success, which in my definition would mean like living a meaningful life, contributing meaningfully to society, all that kind of stuff. It looks so different from person to person, right? Again, yet for teens, we define it so narrowly. So what are some of the skills that this unschooling lifestyle has given your children that help them to survive and succeed? Dare I even say to thrive?
Well, that they have a chance to better know themselves in a space and place where they feel comfortable and safe to do that. And I mean, that comes with so many things. And I hope we can continue to support that well. And, so that when they are fully launched into adulthood, they continue to know themselves and be themselves.
Oh my gosh,
and I mean, I
yes.
think the empowerment that you have, not trying to conform to somebody else all the time is a pretty big thing.
Yes.
So I think that's a big, if you want to call that a skill.
Yes. How many adults are in therapy right now trying to figure out like, who am I? Or really they're in therapy because of an incongruence in the person that they project themselves to be and the life choices that they've made and who they actually are. And then trying to like integrate those and figure out who am I? Who do I want to be? How do I want to show up? What kind of life do I want to live? It's like all that work is supposed to happen from the day that you're born, but so many kids are told, no, you don't get, no, this is who you are, right? Like, this is who you are. This is what you do. And so they just go on that conveyor belt and then they're spit out the other side miserable.
Yeah. And confused because you're like,
yes,
I feel this. I want to do this. I want to be this, but then I've been living a totally different way or been stuck or feel forced in this path.
So what's wrong with me that I'm depressed, anxious, whatever.
Yeah. And am I not good enough? you know, that whole feeling of acceptance and belonging again, right? Like, this is what I want. So does this mean it's not meaningful? Am I not meaningful? You know, am I not important enough to be able to voice that and to live that? So yeah, it's a, and I mean, unfortunately, that also is what happens in so many, you know, structures within school. And I think that's why also having the choice for Bay, for example, having the choice to go to school, choosing that is powerful, because you know, when you feel like you don't have a choice and you just have to conform, and that's the box that you're put in over and over again, then that feeling of not being acceptable continues. You know, it's not just within your parents or a home life, it's in the outer parts of the community as well. So
yes, to know who you are, to be able to evaluate goodness of fit, like from a non-external, non-judgmental space. It's not about, is this right or wrong, good or bad? It's like, is this a good fit for me to be able to do that? I mean, so many skills, and really we can call almost anything a skill, but so many skills that this unschooling lifestyle gives kids that'll help them be successful. Even like just that independence, right? That in self-directed learning, there's the self-directed part, that they are used to evaluating the rightness of a choice for them. They're aware of their needs. They believe that they should honor those needs. They are accustomed to moving in values aligned directions, right? Like to make intentional, conscious choices. And then they have us role modeling, because unschooling isn't something you do to a kid, right? It's like a way of living in connection with a kid. So that means they have our role modeling too, of that, like, we're always learning, we're always growing, we're always evolving. And I think those are all such gifts that I see paying off for my children, in terms of, again, like all those like skill seeds that we planted, like in terms of seeing that garden really grow and thrive.
Yes. And I think, you know, Rachel, you're talking about role modeling. I always like to talk about that so much, you know, especially when parents ask, well, how do I teach my kid this? And what about science? And how am I going to teach them math if I want, you know, now, and that is the biggest thing I always suggest, you know, role modeling how we live our life, I think, is the best teacher. And I think that's another great skill that they get to experience, as well as seeing their parents and their family around them, and they themselves live a life that looks different. You're going to be so much more comfortable going into adulthood and making choices that maybe don't look like the mainstream choices, because you've already experienced it in your own life growing up. You've already seen people that are close to you make choices that are different and, you know, succeed in that way, where we talk about success. And I agree with your definition of success is really that internal, you know, we feel good, but we understand ourselves, and we have, you know, I want to say clarity, although I think sometimes, you know, that's part of the process as well, as kind of that ebbs and flows, but we're able to be just a valuable human being in the way that we feel that we are giving back and are important within our own life as well. And when you get a chance to experience and live that and have role models with that as well, it goes a really, really long way. And I think that is extremely important too.
Ah, that's a really good place to, like, I'm not even going to say end this conversation, because I'm definitely going to want to talk to you again about something else. I'm just going to say pause. It's a good place to pause.
Let's take a pause. Yeah.
Yes, let's take a pause. So the show notes can be found at sagefamily.com/podcast72, where you can also subscribe and get future show notes sent right to your inbox. What, Robyn, are your favorite resources for people to dive deeper into this topic? And of course, tell us all about your stuff too.
Yeah, well, I love, if I'm going to say, I'm going to support my resources as well. My podcast, Honey, I'm Homeschooling the Kids. It's been a resource for me too, because I've had a chance to have conversations like these and hear stories of others that have lived a natural learning path or off the beaten path from others, and be inspired by that as well. I mean, like Rachel, you've been on my show, and there's been so many others that I've always, every time I learn something new, And I know for me, that has been fantastic, and other parents as well. So definitely go to my podcast, Honey, I'm Homeschooling the Kids. And for talking about older teens, I think it's growing. There's more coming out there. Blake Bowles has been really, really great. He's got some good YouTube videos and his books as well. Peter Gray, Free to Learn, still, I find, is a great one, even through adolescence and teenage years, his book. And interviews with that as well. And there's many others in the community, I think, that have been going through the years and have kids who are now entering adulthood who've never gone to school or experienced something different, and just connecting with those other ones. So there's a lot on my podcast, Honey, I'm Homeschooling the Kids, and that's on any podcast player, and they're on the website as well. And Clubhouse, I'm on the Clubhouse app. I have a club called Honey, I'm Homeschooling in that app, where we have discussions each week, and it's all about natural learning, parenting, all of those extensions to self-directed learning as well. And there's a great support in that. So we meet 4 times a week, whether I'm hosting it or others are hosting the conversation. And and through that, there's other support. I have a master class that I don't run all through the year, but you can go to, I'm just actually updating my website, so you should be able to go there and find a registration for the wait list for the next one coming up as well. But and I love your podcast as well still, and your blog. So I still go to it too, and your Instagram. So.
Well, thank you. Well, so anybody who's not connected with Robyn, go get connected with Robyn. I follow her on Instagram. I listen to her podcast. I go over and join her clubhouses from time to time. Are they clubhouses? Do we use them as a noun like that? As a plural noun?
Yeah, I think rooms. They call them rooms.
Okay, rooms.
I had to think about that for a second. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much for joining me to talk about teens. I sincerely enjoyed this conversation. It was exactly what I would have hoped, where even if I forgot to hit record on this, I'd still feel good about it. I'd be like, yeah, that was definitely worth my time. I'm good.
Yes, good. Me too. I feel refreshed. It's been good.
Yes.